Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Pens Iceberg, and we're so glad to have you all in here with us on this Thursday night, the 19th of January. I'm your host, Casey Stamp, alongside my partners, Luke Courtwright and Jason Kaczynski. Luke, we certainly missed you on the show last week. Great to have you back. How are you doing tonight?
It's great to be back. Voice is a little raspy here, but I think we'll make it through here.
Absolutely. We'll certainly we'll make it through. And Jason, great to have you here as always. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Casey. It's what a difference a week makes, huh? A lot more upbeat in everyone's voice tonight.
Absolutely. Certainly last time we met, 6-game losing streak. This time around, 4-game winning streak. Go figure. Well, folks, we've got a lot to get to tonight. First up, game analysis, Pens and Rangers. Then we're going to talk about the upcoming All-Star weekend and its festivities. Certainly we're going to give the latest injury updates, and we'll finish off, as always, with game predictions, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Tonight, the Pens travel to the Big Apple to take on the Eastern Conference leading New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden, one of the older buildings in the league, dimly lit, chippy ice, but fun to watch. The game there nonetheless. First period, Pens brought a lot of tenacity early, and Chris Kunitz would score the game's first goal at the 3:16 marker. Don't even get me started on the Tim Tebow jokes. With the assist to James Neal and Paul Martin. The Penguins would register 8 shots on goal before the Rangers could even get their first. Luke, we'll start with you here. Talk a little bit about the Pens defense in the early going of this one, and how you saw Chris Letang adapting and fitting in his first game since November.
Well, I thought the Pens D looked solid tonight for sure. They looked comfy, which we haven't always seen since Letang's been out. These games with the Rangers, though, they're always kind of these up-tempo, heavy forecheck-oriented games. During that recent losing streak, the thing that jumped out to me in particular was the Penguins were having a really awful time with the exits out of their own zone. I thought tonight that was actually a huge strength of theirs. They were able to make some quick decisions and get the puck out of there before the Rangers could really establish anything on the forecheck. So going forward, that's definitely a positive sign. As far as Chris Letang goes, you would think he must have been 100% because he had the most ice time of any Penguin tonight. They threw him right in there on the first power play unit, seeing time in all situations. Great thing for Brooks Orpik, who hasn't looked like himself for a good portion of the season, so that's a positive also. I thought for Letang there were a couple of instances where the forecheckers closed in on him with a lot of speed. He looked a little tentative towards taking that hit. But with time, that'll get better. He'll be a little more comfortable out there. And for the most part, I thought he looked extremely poised, and he should look good moving forward.
Definitely agree. The Pens had the first 8 shots of the game, and then the Rangers answered with the next 6 right away, and it was just really kind of back and forth at the beginning of the first period. A little bit caught in their own zone, the Pens were early on. But I'll give credit to the Rangers skaters. Gabrick and Anisimov, and they're a well-skating team, and they're guys that can move with speed. And some of their game plan early on was to kind of get the puck deep there. As far as Letang goes, I think he's right back into his all-star form, which is rare for a player of his caliber, of anybody's caliber, really, to miss 21 games and to be thrown right back in. Lion's share of the minutes tonight, 24-17 ice time. That's 2 more minutes more than the next player, which is Brooks Orpik. He assisted on the Malkin's goal. He was blocking shots, and he absorbed some contact early, which I'm pretty sure he was happy to test himself a little bit and get out of the way. And we all know how physical Letang likes to play. He likes to dish out the hits as well. So it was probably a good indicator for him early on that he's back at a good level, and definitely the Pens miss him on defense as far as puck retrievals and getting the puck out of the zone, making a good first pass, and just like Luke said, I think Brooks Orpik was probably the happiest guy on the ice tonight.
Absolutely, and you can see why, having his partner back. The Pens very fundamentally sound on D tonight, finally with a healthy blue line. And as the first period wore on, the ice not the only thing that got a bit chippy. We saw Brandon Dubinsky try a few times to get under the skin of Evgeny Malkin, and of course we saw Zbigniew McCulloch's reaction, sticking up for his teammate. And then there was the fight with Eric Tangrady and Stu Bickel, and finally Brandon Prust would shove Paul Martin into Marc-Andre Fleury. So a bit of a scrum, but no penalties dished out in that final one. Jason, was this the Rangers' game plan coming in to try to frustrate the Pens and get under the skin of our best players?
Absolutely. Like I was saying on Twitter earlier tonight, the Rangers obviously were throwing everything at the cage from bad angles and, difficult shots at Fleury, hoping to get some traffic in there and get a rebound and some traffic at him to throw him off his game. And he made some big saves early. The one nice thing from the Pens tonight is they really didn't take any retaliatory penalties. Evgeny Malkin, in his history, has been known when he's not playing well to take some bad penalties and put the Pens at a disadvantage. And they paid for it dearly in the past. But he's a different player right now. He's in a whole other world, and he wasn't having any of that tonight. Paul Martin did the same. He wasn't going to give the Rangers the advantage, and it definitely served them well. Usually you see Dubinsky, he's usually all over Crosby, and with Sid still being out, he went after Gino tonight, and Malkin's had none of it. He just wants to play hockey. He wasn't having any of Vinny Lecavalier on Sunday, and certainly not having anything with Brandon Dubinsky tonight.
I definitely agree that it was nice to see that there weren't any retaliatory penalties. And in general, I thought it was really nice that the officials really let this game go. Not a whole lot of those shoving matches getting called for 2-2s, which is always good to see. But as far as the Rangers' game plan, I guess, I don't think this was really a Penguin-specific thing. I really think this is just the type of team that the Rangers have. You look at their forwards, Gaborik, Richards, even Fedotenko, they're not really the most physical guys, but everyone else through that lineup, they're really on that edge. Even a guy like Anisimov plays a chippy game. They're really good at closing in on the puck carrier, much like the Penguins, getting in shooting lanes, getting the stick on puck, and just finishing their checks is really important. To be successful, the Rangers, they really need that same type of swagger that the Penguins need. I think the stat tonight that Mr. Steigerwald let us know, I think the Rangers were 21-1-2 after scoring the first goal, which is huge. They obviously didn't get that tonight. It was a very tight checking match. You sometimes you try and throw in your opponents off their game, and maybe you can get a power play out of that and just kind of manufacture some offense. That's really just a 101 course for playing from behind, and that was what the Rangers were playing on their heels all night. So not really surprising to see that at all.
And certainly going back to what Jason said, Gino having none of it from Brandon Dubinsky and none of it from Vinny Lecavalier just a few games ago. And I think it motivates Gino. And as we've seen, a motivated Gino is a very dangerous Gino. And going back to what Luke said, that is how the Rangers play. I mean, that's their game. And certainly I think the Pens beat them at their own game tonight, certainly being the more disciplined of the two teams, and no more scoring in the first, so we move on to the second period, picked up right where the first left off, a ton of physical play, and at 10:06 of the second, Carl Hagelin would score the tying goal. Guys, one thing I saw in particular in the second period, Mike Rupp got in the face of it and got in a shoving match with Evgeny Malkin. Now, we all know that Rupp is one of those guys who is still remembered fondly in Pittsburgh. Obviously, he's a Ranger now, and he's going to play his game regardless of what crest he wears on his chest. He injured Jordan Staal in the previous meeting, and now this. Jason, what do you make of Mike Rupp and how he's adapted to playing against his former team?
I think one of the things you hear a lot of players talk about is playing against their former team for the first time or that first year, after either not being re-signed or traded, and it's a big deal. You always want to stick it to your former team, either say, this, you should have signed me, or you shouldn't have traded me, or whatever it is. And I don't think that really is the case for Pittsburgh. I think Ray Shero would have liked to gotten a deal done, and the dollars maybe just weren't there, and the Rangers offered him a better deal. But Mike Rupp is just doing his job. He's, the situation tonight, I think he's just trying to look at Malkin's tendencies maybe as a teammate last year and say he could try to goat him into taking a penalty or two. It didn't work. But the only thing I have to say about that is I wish I would have saw a little bit more of that from Mike Rupp last year when he was with the Pens. But he'll always have a special place in Pens fans' hearts for his seasons here, and especially the salute to Mr. Yager in the Winter Classic game.
I always love mocking of other players during the games. But Mike Rupp, he's a guy who he knows his capabilities. No matter what team he's playing for, he's going to be a bottom six guy who's going to be a mouthpiece in the locker room. And I think the Penguins have missed that at times, honestly. But he's big. He can skate fairly well for his size, and there's not much of that in the Penguins lineup right now. As Jason said, I'm sure that Rupp is a guy who they would have loved to bring back. But the Rangers came along, and I don't have the number in front of me. I think he got $3 million over 2 years, which is not in the Penguins' budget at all. And plus, he got another year on HBO's 24/7. But yeah, Rupp knows his game. It's not going to change depending on who he's playing against at all.
As did Talbot. Talbot and Rupp both got on 24/7 for the second straight year, and no more scoring in the second, although the Pens did make a huge penalty kill right at the end of the second. Third period, all Pens scoring rise, and it starts with a beautiful play in transition as Richard Park, Matt Cook, and Derek Englund have a 3-on-1 up the ice, and Park was able to score and notch his fourth of the year. Then it was Evgeny Malkin who absolutely torched Henrik Lundqvist on a backhand, got the puck off a turnover from Mark Stahl, making it 3-1, and then, of course, the empty netter would be scored by Evgeny Malkin, and now he is tied with James Neal for the team lead in goals at 24. So Gino now 2 points ahead of Hank Sedin in the points race, possibly on the way to his second Art Ross, and that's in limited games this year. Gino missed quite a few games at the beginning of the season, of course, with that knee still recovering. Luke, what do you think about Evgeny Malkin? Do you think he's the best player in the NHL right now?
Well, I said it earlier in the year. When Evgeny Malkin is on his game, there's nobody better in this league. It's always been a consistency thing. We kind of harp on that all the time, but that's because it's the case. Even you look at Sidney Crosby, he does not have Malkin's natural talent. It's more hard work than anything. Malkin's big, but he's got these smooth puck skills that almost come off as nonchalant at times. And admittedly, sometimes in his own zone, it's a little too nonchalant. Even tonight, we saw him try and deke through two guys right up the middle of the ice in his own zone, which makes me cringe. But the puck did eventually get out. Anyway, they always say how these great players, they know where their teammates are going to be, and then they get the puck to that area. Malkin not only knows where his teammates are going to be, but he knows where the defenders are going, and he decides to go in the other direction. He just thinks the game at another level. But yeah, it's tough to really harp on any of his shortcomings when he's leading the league in scoring, and I think he has 8 fewer games played than Henrik Sedin. So I won't harp on him too much, but he's definitely worth the price of admission by himself.
Definitely agree here. He's in an absolute other stratosphere, comparable or maybe even on the cusp of eclipsing his 09 playoff performance when he won the Conn Smythe, and Cam Ward the other night probably had flashbacks to that series when he just got abused by Malkin. I think what's really great about him is he's unique in the fact that I don't know if there's another player in the league that you can compare him to. You always try to compare and contrast styles and say, you have the defensive center that plays like this other defensive center, or this winger has a tendency to this winger. There's nobody that plays like Evgeny Malkin. He's absolutely dominant with the puck right now, whether he's taking it off an opponent or just having it on a string, circling every inch of the offensive zone. And let's also look at, he's playing with the best line mates he's ever played with in Chris Kunitz and James Neal, who are also having, on pace for career years themselves. His only at times has been that he's tried to do too much, and I think he doesn't. With the line mates he currently has, he doesn't have to do that now, and he's gotten better at things that he wasn't quite good at a few years ago. He's better in the face-off dot. Defensively, he blocked a shot late at the end of the Carolina game the other night to get the puck out of the zone, and he's just doing everything right now, and he's just a joy to watch.
And one of those things about Gino, when he's on, he makes it look so easy. I mean, I agree, Jason. There's really not another player that you can compare him to. His game is so unique. And one of the things that I love about Evgeny Malkin is that even if you're not a Penguins fan, even if you're a casual NHL fan who watches 1, 2, maybe 3 games a year, who doesn't really watch a lot of hockey, if you were to watch the Pittsburgh Penguins play and you were to see Evgeny Malkin on the ice, I think really any given night, that's one of those players who you could pick out of a hat and say, hey, who's that guy? He's got the puck on a string. He's just head and shoulders above the rest most nights. And the Pens now on a 4-game win streak as they beat the Rangers by the final score of 4-1. When we come back, we're going to discuss the All-Star Weekend and its festivities. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The All-Star Weekend is coming up, and of course, Evgeny Malkin selected to participate in the All-Star Game. Evgeny Malkin, of course, I think we could talk about him being a favorite for the Hart Trophy, but that's another story entirely. A couple possible snubs from the Pens' point of view. James Neal not selected despite leading the league in goals for much of the season, and Marc-Andre Fleury a non-pick as well with 22 wins. Luke, why do you think these players weren't selected?
Well, James Neal in particular, he's had that whole foot/leg thing going on for the last few weeks. Initially, we thought he might be out 4 to 6 weeks here, much like Jordan Staal. Then it comes out it's just a bruise thing. Maybe they just didn't want him playing in this game. From a Pens fan perspective, I really don't know that I want him playing in the All-Star game. You would think if all was well and good with him, he would be there, but alas, he's not. A single tear will be shed, I'm sure. As far as Marc-Andre Fleury goes, there are a lot of goalies having good years. Brian Elliott in particular coming out of nowhere to get an All-Star Game nod. But, I mean, you look at the Penguins right now, Fleury's obviously a big part. But with the way Malkin and Neal have played, I think they're both higher up than he is. And honestly, I don't think the Penguins' record so far has really necessitated multiple Penguins in this game, unfortunately. I would like to say otherwise, but not really the case right now.
I tend to agree with Luke there. The only thing about Neal, I'm trying not to look at this with too big of take my Homer glasses off for a second here. After last night, he was tied with Jonathan Taves for second in the league in scoring, and I'm not sure when you'd have one of the top 5 goal scorers in the league being left off the All-Star team. It was, Malkin and Neal are 1-2 in shots, and really kind of going on a symbiotic relationship here, feeding off one another, and at the same time, I'm not sure what the NHL is trying to do here. I'm not sure if it's an unwritten rule about having every team represented, and if a team doesn't have a player in the game, if they have somebody in the rookie game or the skills competition. So I think they try to get some of the major markets taken care of. I mean, obviously Carey Price is not having an all-star season, and Montreal's having a season to quickly forget. But Montreal's a big market, and I'm sure they want that represented, and he's the lone Canadians rep there. So it's a difficult choice. You're not going to make everybody happy with anything. But like Luke said, I'll be happy to give Neal the rest and Fleury the rest and gear up for a playoff run this spring.
And by the way, going back to what Luke said about Brian Elliott, I think, as an NHL fan, I congratulate Brian Elliott, certainly doing so well there in St. Louis, and struggled much of last year with the Ottawa Senators. And of course, the All-Star game taking place in Ottawa. The two captains, one a current Senator, one a former Senator, Daniel Alfredson and Zdeno Chara. What do you think of the captain selection? Jason, we'll start with you.
I don't have a problem with it at all. It obviously gives it an Ottawa flavor with Chara being an ex-senator. The same last year when you had Eric Stahl, who didn't get voted in by the fans, but was picked to make the game, and obviously the game was in Raleigh, so it seemed like a reasonable pick, make the hometown fans happy. The Sens fans sort of stuffed the ballot box this year, and they're pretty well represented. So, the Ottawa flavor is nice. Or the only other thing I think they maybe could have done was renew the Battle of Ontario a little bit and maybe pick a Leaf as a captain, whether it was Phaneuf or maybe even Phil Kessel, who was the last man standing last year. He was the last pick and got the car as a consolation prize. And but yeah, I think it worked out well the way they picked it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting dynamic. I think as far as All-Star games go, you can't really do too much. I think it's one of those events that really kind of needs to sell itself. I recall reading a few months ago there was a blog who was promoting this stuffing the ballot box not for Ottawa Senators, but for all players who used to play for the Senators. So guys like Martin Havlat, Marian Hossa, even Ray Emery, just kind of throwing their names in there, which would have been an incredibly fun idea, but we've seen campaigns like those fail miserably in the past. I also would have liked to see Solani versus Lidstrom. I read that a few weeks ago. That was a good possibility, but both of them turned the game down. Honestly, the All-Star game itself, to me, is probably the least entertaining part of the entire weekend. I think the draft is more interesting. I think the skills competition is more interesting. I honestly think the Young Stars game is more interesting than the All-Star game. But you got to do what you got to do. Chara versus Alfredson, it's something. Hopefully the NHL can market that to some degree.
And once again, the All-Star teams will be selected by way of fantasy draft, which, by the way, I got to say, I really love the fantasy draft as an avid gamer. Big on NHL 12. I always do my franchises through fantasy draft. Phil Kessel, as Jason touched on, the last pick in the previous fantasy draft. I don't think that'll be the case this year. Luke, Alfie with the first pick. Who do you think he might select first?
Well, he's got plenty of Senators to pick from here. He could go Spezza. He could go McCulloch. He could go Carlson. So he could even dive in and pick a guy like Marian Hossa, who he's played with in the past. Maybe it's his dream to reunite with Marian Hossa, and we've seen those angles kind of play out last year during the draft. So it's tough to kind of read his mind. I think my bold prediction will be he will go with Erik Karlsson, not only his current teammate, but also his fellow countryman in Sweden. So I'll go with Karlsson.
Jason, who do you think will Zdeno Chara take first?
Well, he has an interesting decision to make, because he can either, if he wants to get some of the crowd back on his side, I'm sure they'll embrace him, obviously, in an All-Star game as a former Senator. But does he take one of the hometown Sens? Does he take a former Sen in Marian Hossa? Does he take one of his teammates, either Patrice Bergeron or Tim Thomas, and kind of turn this into a little bit of a divisional battle, at least at the top of the draft? I would surprise people if I was Chara, and I would take Hossa and have the former Sens on the same team.
In terms of attendance and revenue and exposure, what do you think the All-Star Weekend offers to a city? Certainly Ottawa, not a hockey town that needs much exposure. They're in the top 5 in attendance. But what do you think that the All-Star Game, do you think it's something that teams pull for, or is it something that they just kind of select randomly? What does it offer? Jason, we'll start with you.
Well, we were talking a little bit off here about Gary Bettman's radio show on XM satellite. And one of the things he was talking about today was, the teams actually do not bid for it, but they make it known that they'd like to host one of the events. And I think they'd probably like to showcase some good markets, some new arenas maybe, or places that maybe they haven't been in 20 years or maybe ever. So it's a festival of hockey for the hometown fans, and you have to treat the sponsors well who pay good money to promote the product year in and year out, and I have no problem with that. It sounds like they have some pretty neat events lined up this year. I know they have the Frozen Canal in Ottawa that they skate on during the winter. I think there was talk about a parade on skates with the award trophies, so that would be pretty neat. But each city seems to do it up with their little local flavor, and it's nice for the fans.
Yeah, these types of events are usually more league-oriented than really team-oriented. This really isn't a huge thing for the Senators. I mean, it's a guaranteed sellout, little bit of increased traffic in Ottawa. Their arena isn't actually in Ottawa. It's like 10 miles outside the city. So as far as that goes, they'll make a little bit off that, concession money, and so forth. But merchandising, that's something that's split evenly among the 30 teams. It'll get the NHL, front page in the papers. So yeah, it's these types of events like this, the draft even, it's something, you can get the front page of the paper and promote the team, I guess, a little bit that way, but definitely more league-oriented, and Count Bettman is very happy with these type of events to market his game.
All right, well, certainly looking forward to a very fun All-Star weekend coming up here very soon. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we return, injury updates and game predictions. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Some of the latest injury updates real quick for you. Chris Letang made his return tonight, had a point, of course. Sidney Crosby has been meeting with Dr. Ted Carrick this week to work on his balance issues. We'll keep you posted as more info becomes available on that front. Aaron Asham is now being diagnosed with concussion-like symptoms. He was scratched from tonight's game. And finally, Jordan Staal still out recovering from his knee injury. I probably expect him back 3 to 4 weeks from now. And with that, we can move on to game prediction. Tomorrow night, the Penguins take on the Canadiens, I believe, at home in the Consol Energy Center. The last time these two teams met was in late November, as it was Max Pacioretty hitting Chris Letang, obviously breaking the nose of Chris Letang and putting him out with that concussion for 20-plus games. Luke, we'll begin with you here. What do you expect to see in this game, and do you think there will be any retaliation for Pac's hit on Chris Letang?
You might see something. I'm not sold that it'll be a 100% fight, but it wouldn't surprise me if somebody challenged Pacioretty pretty early on. We'll see what happens there. He seems to be a pretty stand-up guy, so I think if he is challenged, he'll drop them. These games with Montreal seem to go to overtime more often than not, so I'm going to say it's going to be. I'll push it to the shootout even. We'll say 3-2 Penguins victory in the shootout.
Yeah, I think you could definitely look for some retaliation or at least a challenge from a Pens player or two on Pacioretty. Last year, for most of the year, the Pens led the league in fighting majors, and we haven't really seen that a lot this year until lately when the Pens have been looking to get some momentum and get a little bit of physicality back in their games. So, I'd like to see somebody drop a Subban personally, but it's been a year to forget for Montreal. It's just things are going downhill quickly. The Camilleri, makes an off comment about the team, and he's traded the next day, and he's already talking about in Canada about a list of GM replacements. It's gone from bad to worse pretty fast. I'll say Chris Letang wants to get Pacioretty back, but he wants to do it on the scoreboard, so I'm looking for him to be really motivated for the game. I'll say Pens 4-1.
Then on Sunday, it'll be another great game between the Pens and the Caps. Of course, the Pens were blanked last time against Washington. Jason, what do you expect to see this time around?
Well, the the last game we saw with these two teams, it was a neutral game, or neutral zone muck fest. It was just, it was pretty putrid overall. But that's when the Pens that was their last loss. They played fairly well, got some good shots on goal, but, things have kind of turned the corner for them, and I expect that to continue, especially in Malton and the top line dominance. I'll look for the Pens to win home ice 3-1 and turn a 6-game losing streak into a 6-game win streak.
I think that since we have Malkin kind of in his groove now, this is going to be a big game, a big statement game for him even. He seems to really thrive in these matchups against his fellow countryman, Mr. Ovechkin. As Jason pointed out, the last time these two teams met, a very ugly game. I think this one's going to be a little more wide open. They would like to play another tight game, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to say 4-2 Pens.
And, well, certainly the road doesn't get any easier as the Pens move it on up in the Eastern Conference, finally with a healthy blue line, and that should contribute in a big way. All right, folks, that's going to do it for tonight's show. We thank you all so much for tuning in as always. Luke, we look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, I look forward to it.
Have a great week, and Jason, you as well. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you right back here next week.
Always a pleasure, Casey. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. All right, folks, from all of us here at the Pens Iceberg, I'm Casey Stamp signing off. Have a great night and a great week.